There's a moment in every person's life when something shifts, when we make an unconscious decision that will shape how we move through the world from that point forward. It's not dramatic, like in the movies, with thunder and lightning marking the transformation. Instead, it's quiet, almost imperceptible, like a door closing softly in the distance. This moment is when we disconnect from ourselves, and it's precisely when trauma begins to take root in our lives. Understanding this process isn't just about looking backward at our wounds. It's about recognizing the patterns that continue to play out in our daily experiences, in our relationships, in the way we treat ourselves when no one else is watching. The human nervous system is designed to keep us safe, to ensure our survival above all else. When we're children, this survival mechanism works in ways that might seem puzzling to adults. A child doesn't have the luxury of leaving a harmful situation or confronting an abusive parent. They can't pack their bags and find a new family when things get tough. So what does a developing mind do when faced with circumstances that feel overwhelming or threatening? It adapts in the most ingenious way possible. It begins to split off parts of itself, to disconnect from feelings, needs, and authentic responses that might put survival at risk. This disconnection doesn't happen because we're weak or broken. It happens because we're incredibly intelligent beings doing whatever it takes to survive in environments that may not be equipped to handle our full emotional spectrum. Think about a child who learns that expressing anger leads to punishment or abandonment. That child will quickly learn to suppress their anger, to smile when they're hurt, to become what others need them to be, rather than expressing who they truly are. This isn't a conscious choice. It's an automatic survival response that becomes so deeply ingrained it feels like our natural personality. The tragedy is that what serves us as children often becomes the very thing that limits us as adults. The same mechanisms that protected us in childhood can become prisons that keep us from experiencing genuine connection, authentic self-expression, and the full range of human emotions that make life rich and meaningful. We carry these protective strategies into our adult relationships, our careers, our parenting, often without realizing we're still operating from a place of survival rather than authentic living. When we talk about trauma, we're not just talking about the big, obvious events that make headlines. We're talking about the accumulation of moments when we learned it wasn't safe to be ourselves. Maybe it was the subtle message that our emotions were too much for others to handle. Maybe it was the feeling that love was conditional on our performance, our achievements, our ability to make others comfortable. Maybe it was the realization that speaking our truth led to conflict, so we learned to swallow our words and smile instead.
The body keeps score of every moment we abandon ourselves for the sake of keeping others happy or maintaining the illusion of safety. Our nervous system remembers every time we chose disconnection over authenticity, and it begins to expect that this is how life works. We develop what we might call a false self, a carefully constructed persona that we present to the world, while our true self retreats deeper and deeper into hiding, sometimes so deep that we forget it exists at all. This false self becomes incredibly sophisticated over time. It learns to read rooms, to anticipate what others need, to shape-shift in ways that ensure acceptance and avoid rejection. It becomes so good at this performance that we might receive praise for being so mature for our age or such a good child. But inside, there's often a growing sense of emptiness, a feeling that something essential is missing, that we can't quite put our finger on what it is. The disconnection from self doesn't just affect our emotional life, it impacts our physical health in profound ways. When we're constantly monitoring our environment for threats, when we're always prepared to adapt ourselves to meet others' needs, our nervous system remains in a state of chronic activation. This ongoing stress response can manifest as anxiety, depression, chronic pain, autoimmune conditions, and a host of other symptoms that seem to have no clear medical cause. Our bodies are trying to tell us something important through these symptoms. They're sending us messages about the cost of living disconnected from our authentic selves. But because we've learned to override our body's signals, to push through discomfort, to prioritize others' needs over our own, we often miss these crucial communications. We might treat the symptoms without addressing the underlying disconnection that's creating them. The interesting thing about trauma is that it's not really about what happened to us. It's about what didn't happen. It's about the attunement we didn't receive, the emotional safety that wasn't provided, the permission to be ourselves that was never granted. A child needs to feel seen, heard, and accepted for who they are, not for who they can become or what they can achieve. When this fundamental need isn't met, the child learns to see themselves through others' eyes, rather than developing a strong sense of their own identity.
This is why two people can experience the same event and have completely different responses. One child might have a secure attachment with a caregiver who helps them process difficult experiences, while another child might face the same challenges without that support system. The first child learns that difficult emotions are temporary and manageable, while the second child learns that overwhelming feelings are dangerous and must be avoided at all costs. The moment we disconnect from ourselves is also the moment we begin to lose touch with our internal compass, our ability to know what we need, what we want, what feels right for us. We become dependent on external validation to know if we're okay, if we're lovable, if we're enough. This external focus becomes so automatic that we might not even realize we've lost connection with our own inner wisdom. But here's what's truly remarkable about the human spirit. Even in the deepest disconnection, some part of us remains intact. There's always a spark of authentic self that survives, waiting patiently for the conditions that will allow it to emerge again. This is the part of us that feels stirred by certain music, that feels moved by acts of kindness, that knows something is missing even when everything looks perfect on the surface. Now, I want to pause here and ask you something important. Does today's theme resonate with you, and do you feel you want to add to our content? If so, please write in the comments about your experiences if you feel comfortable doing so. I would love to read your comment and connect with you on this journey of understanding. Thank you for clicking on this video and joining me here on Not What It Seems, where you'll receive daily content designed to help you understand the deeper patterns that shape our lives. I'm grateful you've chosen to spend this time exploring these important topics with me. The journey back to self often begins with recognizing the patterns that no longer serve us. It starts with noticing the moments when we feel most disconnected from ourselves, when we're performing rather than being, when we are reacting from old wounds rather than responding from our authentic self. This awareness itself is healing because it breaks the unconscious spell that keeps us trapped in outdated survival strategies. Recovery from trauma isn't about forgetting what happened or pretending everything is fine. It's about slowly, gently reconnecting with the parts of ourselves we had to hide away for safety. It's about learning to trust our own feelings again, to honor our needs, to express our truth even when it feels scary. This process requires immense compassion for ourselves because we're essentially rewiring patterns that were formed when we were vulnerable and doing our best to survive. The nervous system can learn new patterns, but it takes time and patience.
Just as we didn't disconnect from ourselves overnight, we won't reconnect overnight either. The process involves slowly building tolerance for authentic feeling, for genuine connection, for the vulnerability that comes with being truly seen. It means learning to stay present with ourselves even when old fears arise, even when every instinct tells us to retreat into familiar patterns of disconnection. One of the most profound realizations in this healing journey is understanding that the child who made the decision to disconnect was incredibly wise. They were doing exactly what they needed to do to survive in their circumstances. This isn't about blame or judgment. It's about recognition and honoring the intelligence that kept us alive when we had no other options. From this place of self-compassion, we can begin to make new choices based on our current reality rather than our past fears. The beautiful thing about reconnecting with ourselves is that it doesn't just heal our individual wounds, it impacts every relationship in our lives. When we stop performing and start being authentic, we give others permission to do the same. When we learn to honor our own needs, we model healthy boundaries. When we express our truth with kindness, we create space for genuine intimacy. The healing ripples outward in ways we might never fully realize.
But let's be honest about something important. This journey isn't always comfortable. Reconnecting with ourselves means feeling feelings we've spent years avoiding. It means facing truths we've been running from. It means acknowledging needs we've been denying. There will be moments when the old patterns feel safer, when disconnection seems easier than the vulnerability of authentic living. This is normal and expected, not a sign of failure. The key is learning to be gentle with ourselves during these challenging moments. Instead of judging ourselves for falling back into old patterns, we can notice what's happening with curiosity and compassion. We can ask ourselves what we need in this moment. What would help us feel safe enough to stay connected to our authentic self? Sometimes the answer is rest. Sometimes it's reaching out for support. Sometimes it's simply acknowledging that healing isn't linear. As we develop this new relationship with ourselves, we begin to notice subtle changes in how we move through the world. We might find ourselves saying no to things that don't align with our values. We might discover interests we had forgotten we had. We might feel emotions more fully, both the difficult ones and the joyful ones. We might find ourselves drawn to different people, different activities, different ways of spending our time. These changes can feel disorienting at first, especially if people in our lives are used to the old version of us. Some relationships might need to evolve, some might need to end, and new ones might begin. This isn't about becoming selfish or inconsiderate. It's about becoming authentic. It's about honoring the truth of who we are while still maintaining respect and care for others. The process of reconnecting with ourselves also involves learning to trust our body's wisdom again. Our body holds so much information about what we need, what feels right, what situations are healthy for us. But years of disconnection can make us skeptical of these signals. Learning to pause and check in with our body throughout the day, to notice tension, to honor fatigue, to celebrate joy. These become acts of rebellion against the old patterns of disconnection.
Sometimes people worry that if they start honoring their authentic self, they'll become too much for others to handle. But the opposite is usually true. When we're operating from our authentic self rather than our false self, we're actually easier to be around because we're not carrying the tension of constant performance. We're not expecting others to fill the void that comes from self-abandonment. We're more present, more genuine, more capable of real intimacy. The moment we begin to reconnect with ourselves is also the moment we begin to interrupt the cycle of trauma for future generations. Children learn more from what we do than what we say. When they see us honoring our emotions, setting healthy boundaries, expressing our needs with kindness, They learn that it's safe to be authentic. They learn that feelings are temporary and manageable. They learn that they are enough just as they are. This doesn't mean we need to be perfect. In fact, our imperfections, when handled with self-compassion, teach children how to be human. When they see us make mistakes and then repair them, when they see us struggle and then seek support, when they see us feel deeply and then recover, they learn resilience. They learn that being human includes the full spectrum of experience, and that's not only okay, it's beautiful. As we near the end of our time together today, I want to reflect on something profound. The moment you disconnect from yourself doesn't have to be the defining moment of your story. You have the power to write a different ending, to create new moments where you choose connection over protection, authenticity over performance, presence over escape. Every time you pause to ask yourself what you need, every time you honor a feeling instead of pushing it away, every time you express your truth with kindness, you're healing the original wound of disconnection. The journey back to yourself is perhaps the most important journey you'll ever take. It's not always easy, but it's always worth it. Because at the end of the day, the relationship you have with yourself is the foundation for every other relationship in your life. When you learn to treat yourself with the same kindness you'd show a good friend, when you learn to listen to your inner voice with the same attention you'd give to someone you love, when you learn to honor your needs with the same respect you'd show to anyone else's, you create a life that feels authentic and meaningful.
Remember, healing isn't about reaching some perfect state where you never feel triggered or never fall back into old patterns. Healing is about developing a different relationship with your triggers, about catching yourself sooner when you slip into disconnection, about having more tools for returning to your authentic self when you notice you've drifted away. It's about progress, not perfection, and every small step toward greater self-connection is worth celebrating. If you found value in today's exploration of trauma and disconnection, please give this video a like to help others discover this content. Your engagement helps us reach people who might need to hear these messages. If you feel moved to share your own experiences or insights in the comments, I'd be honored to read them. And if you want to continue this journey of understanding with daily content that explores the deeper patterns shaping our lives, consider subscribing to Not What It Seems. Thank you for being here, for being open to growth, and for having the courage to look at these difficult but important topics. Until next time, be gentle with yourself, and remember that your authentic self is always worth coming home to.